Welcome to another video about the Zoom PodTrak P4. In this video, I'm going to specifically cover the SoundPads, the 4 SoundPads that are on the device, what they are used for, how you can set them up, what the different playback modes are, and a couple more things. Now, first things first, if you want to check out more videos about the Zoom PodTrak P4, I will have a link to a playlist in the description below, as well as linked up here. There you will find a full review as well as comparisons to different Zoom products and also my opinion about this recorder in general for podcasting as well as other use cases. But in this video, we are specifically looking at the 4 SoundPads and how they work. For disclosure, this PodTrak device was sent to me by the Sound Service GmbH company in Germany, so a big shout out to them, and I will be returning this device as I am finished filming these videos. Now jumping into the SoundPads on the Zoom PodTrak P4. Now what you have here are 4 small buttons labeled A, B, C, and D, and you also have a dial which controls the volume of the SoundTrak, basically, or the SoundPad track. Why would you even want to use something like these SoundPads? Now, there are actually a couple of different reasons why that may be the case. One of the most notable, for example, is if you want to completely, fully finish, produce your podcast right then and there when you are sitting together and recording. For that purpose, these SoundPads can, for example, be used for things like the intro, your outro, or background music, as well as some different effects like applause or a cash register or similar things. Another cool idea, I think, for these pads would be for listener questions, for example, or some kind of audio commentary or some kind of audio messages that you can play whilst you are also recording the show. This makes the post-processing really easy because you actually have these audio playing whilst you have already been recording, and so you don't have to add them afterwards. This is especially true, for example, to include listener questions, and that's actually one of my favorite use cases for SoundPads like this, to be able to play these messages. But not just that, and that's an important part, you can even pause the listener question whilst it is being played so that everybody can give comments as you are moving along the message, and then you can continue listening to the message, and as it finishes off, you are then free to talk again with everybody together. Now, these are not exclusive, so if you are using any of these SoundPads, all of the microphones are still very much active. So if you don't want the microphones to be recorded, you would either have to mute everybody as you are playing the SoundPad, or you just have to let everybody know that, for example, during the intro, if you have that for the intro purpose, that you are not going to be talking throughout that intro. Otherwise, you will have to take that out in the post-processing. However, another cool thing about the specific implementation of the SoundPads on the Zoom PodTrak P4 is that you get one specific track as a WAV file where you only will find the sound effects. So you will find one track for each microphone. So that's for example, when you're using 4 XLR microphones, you will also get the sound effects track. And in addition to that, of course, you also get the stereo mix down of everything as you were hearing it through the headphone output. Now, to navigate the menus, I actually have to switch to my Octava MK012, which is connected here to the Zoom F6 audio recorder. Prior to this, you already heard the audio coming from the Zoom P4 recorded with the Shure Beta 57A. But now we can go over and have a look at the menu structure of how you can set these SoundPads up, what settings you can actually change, and of course also looking into the different playback modes that there are. So to change these settings on the SoundPads, you can go onto the menu button. There you will most likely end up on the Files point, so you navigate one step down, and with the Enter button, you go into that menu. Now you can see that you have those 4 SoundPads right in front of you, and depending on which one you want to change, you can navigate there with the up and down arrow keys. Now, once you have selected the one that you like, you can go into the Enter button. And with each SoundPad, you actually have 3 options. You can assign a new sound, you can change the play mode, as well as the levels. With the levels, you can change the loudness or the volume of each SoundPad as it is played back. However, you can also have a complete control over this with the volume knob right on the device, but this volume knob then will take effect for all of the SoundPads. So this here specifically is helpful for making a specific sound louder or less loud in comparison to the others. Something to note here is that if you want to have a listen and check your levels, you can actually just hit the button as you are inside of this menu or its submenus. So if I hit this button now, it will actually play back that sound for me so that I can check whether or not the levels are correct, if it's the right sound, and so on. Now going to sound assign, as you can see, it loads for a second and it actually checks the SD card that you have inside of the device, which you can put in on the side here. And for me, I just have a standard old 16 gigabyte SD card in there, even though you can put the faster cards in there, which also support up to 512 gigabytes, which is kind of stunning. And then you can actually navigate those 11, I think, preset sounds that you get from the device itself and it already comes with. And there you will have things like applause, cash register, dream, funky, hard riff, horn jazz, laughter, piano, electronic. Then you have rim shot, sad trombone. Let's make it that. And now if I hit this, I can hear that on my headphones that I have hanging around here. But you will not be able to hear that at the moment because I can't record and be in this menu at the same time. But something else that is very important is that with the sound assign, you can actually assign your own sounds and also previously recorded things. Like, for example, if I navigate all the way to the top here, you can see that I have previously recorded things on this SD card and I can actually select these right here. Now this only shows you things that are on the topmost level of the SD card, so that you have to put them there if you want them to show up here. And it is most likely helpful to also make a kind of like an identifier in the front of your file name, for example, to start your SoundPad sounds with an A or something, so that they are right at the top and you don't have to scroll through everything and search for your specific sound, because you will also find, as I mentioned, your own recordings that you are doing here. The mix down of that you will find here for also being able to assign it to one of these SoundPads. Now, with all of that, we can navigate back and now we have the sad trombone on D, but now we also want to check out the play modes. And here we have one shot, pause, loop, as well as hold. One shot essentially just plays the thing from start to finish. If you click the button again, it is not going to do anything. It is going to play the whole thing no matter what. If you choose pause, this is the one that I think is really cool and helpful, specifically for those messages that you have recorded beforehand, like for example the call in from a listener and those kind of things. Because with pause, you can actually start the playback and then hit the SoundPad again, and with that you can react to the message live right there, and then hit the SoundPad again, and it actually continues playing from that point forward, so that you can continue and take your time answering any questions that are coming up there. Then with loop, the sound is continuously repeated over and over again until you hit the SoundPad again. And with hold, that's one, for example, for something like applause, where you actually only hear the sound as long as you also hold this button down. So that's how the play modes are set up, and you can choose this with each of the SoundPads individually. So for example, if you have intro music that you want to have in the background, you can set that one to loop on A, and you can also set like a listener question on B, for example, on pause, so that you can pause in between and so on. So each of these settings can be done individually for each individual sound pad. Now let's go with hold for this one. And now let's navigate out of here. And as I've mentioned, all of these are set up exactly the same way. We have applause on C. Then on B, I think I have a custom message that I'm going to demonstrate in a second, which I also have with the pause mode, so that the playback is on pause mode. And on A, we have funky, and that's on one shot. So it's just going to be playing that one from the beginning all the way to the end. So now that we're back on the main screen, I'm going to pick up my headphones right here so that I can also hear what you will be able to hear. And I'm going to hit record on this audio recorder right here and do a sync clap here. So now you will be able to hear the Shure Beta 57A again recorded into the Zoom PodTrak P4 on channel 1, gain set about 6 or 5 or 6, something like that, limiter and low-cut filter engaged inside of the PodTrak P4. But now the main point here is about this SoundPad right here, so that we can see how these different sounds work as well as the different playback modes. Now, first up, let's go with the one that we just set up for this purpose, and that was the set trombone, and it is set on one shot. That is what I changed it to, because we also have the hold on channel C or SoundPad C here. Now, something important here is that you have this dial right here, which controls the SoundPad volume for all of these four together, so that if you want to fade something in, you can do this with this small dial right here. You also have the volume of this channel basically on here, so that you can see whenever there is a effect playing, as well as fading in and out, which is signified inside of this channel, which has these little 4 squares on the screen. Now, something I find really cool is that you will get these as individual tracks, as well as the mix down of everything together. So for example, if you find out later that your effects were way too loud in the recording, you can bring in all of these individual wave files and have that in your editing program, and then do your changes right there, or replace certain things, or make them louder and or less loud. But now let's have a listen for the sad trombone right here on one shot mode. And there you can see I can increase the volume a little bit so that it's a little louder. But as you were able to see, this is on one shot. It's just going to be played once throughout. Now I have another one on one shot, and that's A, and that's some funky music. So if I play that, you can hear. But if I play it again, it just restarts from the start immediately, and it blinks until it's done playing. And then, as it is just one shot, it's going to be stopped right at the end of that first playthrough. Something else I have set up here is applause on channel C or SoundPad C, and that is actually hold. So I only hear it for as long as I hold this button down. So now we have applause. Thank you very much. And I can fade it, for example, if I wanted to, and I can bring it back, and I can let go. So this is going to be looping the sound for as long as I am actively holding this button down. Now, I mentioned listener questions, and that, I think, is one of the coolest ways to integrate these SoundPads into your podcast if you have the chance. For example, asking listeners of your show that you have a new guest coming up and you want to ask them a listener question, and you want to also have them listen to that message, then you can set one of these buttons, or 2 or 3 or maybe 4, up for these questions. And that's what I did with B. I recorded a custom message into this, and you will see the pause mode, because I think that's really cool that you can pause something whilst it is being played back. You will also see that it's paused, and you can then integrate that or work with that. So as I'm starting this is a pre-recorded message sending in that, but I can also speak over it. So for example, if there's something really funny and everybody in the room starts laughing, then that will be picked up and recorded by the device. It's not like everything else is muted while you are doing this. And now I can continue this because I had something interesting to say, and now I can continue listening to this sound message as I press the button again. The podcast so that this question can be asked on the air with the help of these nifty and very helpful sound pads. And there you have it. that was this message that was recorded into the PodTrak and then used as a SoundPad on this device. This can of course also be done with any files from your computer. However, the file might have to be converted to a file format that works with the Zoom PodTrak P4. And most definitely 16-bit WAV files will work. I have also seen people say that this is actually something that should be done beforehand and not on the device. Even though the device does support certain conversions, it takes a long time. So prepare your files beforehand into the format that this device understands, which is 16-bit with 44.1 kilohertz. And that also works for these SoundPad sounds. Now, this was a quick overview of the SoundPad functionality on the Zoom PodTrak P4. As I've mentioned multiple times throughout this video, I think this is a really cool effect, specifically for things like intro, outro, as well as these listener questions. In certain circumstances, maybe even these effects, for example, like applause, sad trombone, and similar things, can make a really fun addition to your podcast. It may be a little limiting that you only have 4 available here. However, I would say if you have intro and outro, that's 2. You still have plenty of room for 2 more effects. But if you do your intro and outro after the fact, then you can of course use all 4 for anything you want, like listener questions or funny little sounds that you can play whilst you are recording your show. But most definitely for someone who wants to do their show completely finished right out of the device, this can be a really cool tool and make your workflow that much easier so that you don't have to do any editing in the aftermath whatsoever. Now, if you found this video interesting or helpful, please give me a thumbs up. That helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Of course, also subscribe for more videos like this, as well as about the Zoom PodTrak. I have a whole playlist of videos about this device in the description down below. You can of course also ask questions in the comment section down below. However, as I've mentioned before, this device is a loan, so I will not be having this in a couple of weeks from now. So with all of that said, I hope you have an amazing day, make it your life, launch your podcast, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.